Welcome to Obsession Engineering at a cold, windy and damp Donington Park. This is the first official BSB test for the season, and it's not as nice as it was in Spain. So I'm going in the garage, where it's considerably less windy. We must have gone up in the world compared to Stock 6 last year because we've been allowed in a garage. The heater is warming up the sump, so the oil's warm when we start the bike in a few minutes. There is still a little patina on the bike from Spain because the new fairing, I got it yesterday, but we need to send it to paint, so we're actually just going to do this test on the old kit. John King at John King Developments has knocked the dents out of our silencer and repacked that for us. We have some Moto Master front brake discs to test. We were supposed to get some Brembos here as well, but they haven't turned up yet, so we've got those, and at the moment we're on slicks. But by the time we go out in about 45 minutes, we might be on wets looking at the weather. Setup wise on the bike, if it's dry, we're starting on the base setting that we finished Spain with, because the circuit here at Donington, you've got lots of quite fast direction changes. It's quite a flowing circuit, apart from the Melbourne Loop at the end. So it's relatively similar in layout to Andalusia, just not as fast and not as warm. But we're going to start on that setting that we think it works and will be relatively familiar to Franco, and then we'll work through some other bits when the weather allows. If it's full wet, we will be doing some wet setup time as well, because of course we haven't done any wet riding yet. Luckily, Franco loves the wet. The details don't stop just at the bike though. I've actually managed to get my laptop to talk to the data logger, which it wouldn't do in Spain because my Ethernet doesn't work, but I've got an adapter that works, and after a bit of faffing this morning, I've managed to get the workspace I built on Matt's laptop onto my laptop. I just don't have any data to put in it yet. And we've rearranged our setup sheet. So some of the stuff we had on it last year that frankly we didn't really need last year, we've taken off, and then we've added a few other bits. We've got references for which wheel we're using, so that if we damage a wheel or we have different discs on different wheels, that references into what wheel we're using. We also have a map and a mode bit down here, which we didn't need on the 600 because we never ever changed anything like that. And we've taken a few little bits out, like the ride height thing, because we've already got shock length, and on this bike, shock length is ride height, basically. Because it's not adjustable enough to need anything else. So that's changed. Unfortunately, the weather at Donington Park hasn't. We're going to go and have a little roll out. The only problem being that about half an hour ago it rained, but it's really windy, so it's drying quite quickly, to the extent of this bit of tarmac looks relatively damp. The track, because it's had a few bikes on it, is actually more in the wind as well. The track's almost dry, but it is also spitting in the air. So Franco just wants to go out and have a couple of laps, and it's the first time we've had a rain map, like a wet map in the bike, and obviously the wheel size and all that are different, so it's just a real shakedown test almost again to make sure it actually works. But I might stay in the garage while he's riding around. It's blooming cold. Franco's done a whole 2 laps of almost a dry, wet track time. I got slightly told off for having my camera on pit lane, and then because he's one of the few people actually out there, he has got collared to talk on the old commentary. The boys have got the warmers back on the wets. The joys of Pirelli wets, they do say 50 degrees for half an hour on the warmers. He commented that the throttle was too soft, but then it is nearly dry. So we'll have a bit more of a chat through, but I suspect if it was full wet, you'd probably want it like that. But we'll have a chat through it, but that's the whole point of just having a little run out, is at least we get some information. So now I'll download the data and see what the bike looks like.
It was mainly windy, really windy, getting blown about a bit.
Did you get blown off?
Yeah, blown off the track. Yeah. No, it was alright really, just need to get some dry laps, to be fair.
So he did an 8-lap run, well 7 running in, and when he pulled in he was 5th fastest in the session, so he's learning this whole big bike thing fairly quickly. He did come in and commented on the way into the corner, into Melbourne Loop and a little bit down Craner when he shifted off the throttle. He's getting a bit of chatter from the rear. So I've made 2 changes. I've taken a bit of preload out the rear so that it leaves the rear tyre on the floor a bit more on the brake. Basically, it's got a bit more sag, so it should have a little bit more rear contact on the brake. And we've changed the engine braking slightly and changed which mode he's on the buttons. So hopefully that will sort it out, or at least maybe improve it a little bit, and it will give us an idea where to go if it still does it. Basically, this is down into the Melbourne Loop, and he said this is where it was worse, and you can actually see this is the real teller here. The pink line is front wheel speed, the orange line is rear wheel speed, and you can actually see it picking up and losing speed, basically juddering all the time there. So what I'll do in a minute is I'll check the suspension travel and see if the suspension topping out somewhere around there. But if I zoom out of there a little bit, into Foggy S, it's there, it's doing it a little bit as well, and basically every big braking area is getting a bit of this noise. So we can see it is definitely real. We just now have to find out how to fix it. They've had a couple of minutes to heat up, and that is a nice free spinning front wheel. If we were on the standard discs now, that would be pretty difficult to move. They drag like hell. So brake discs have fixed one problem. Of course, we've just generated another one with some chatter, but never mind,
Was it top 6?
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. A few things the mechanic needs to sort out, but but no, spot on first session, really. Happy.
There's some big names behind you.
Yeah, well, we've got McConnell just in front of us. Obviously, top names, Richard Kerr's in front, yeah, a few more Hondas, but happy. Cannot really expect much more, really.
The chatter issue, I think it's mechanical, so we're going to pull the clutch out of it, because they're not unknown for a few little clutch niggles with these things, so we're going to pull the clutch out and have a look at that. We're also going to do a gearing change, which is going to help the way the bike turns through some of the first half of the lap, and we're not anywhere near using all the RPM, so we can afford to go short on the gearing to give us a shorter wheelbase. It'll get more load on the back tyre, and we're going to change the clutch in it. So 2 changes, but that'll do different things, so I don't mind doing 2 at once, and then fingers crossed it dries out a bit for the last session of the day, or it just rains more so we get a proper wet session.
And it's very wet, but the track temperature's not too bad, so good time to do a bit of wet setup for sure.
It's brand new tarmac at Donington.
Yeah, and to be fair, the feedback's been pretty good, to be honest. You know, the lads are coming back in and saying it's not too bad, it's not too slippy. So that's the tarmac out there, Dave. The black stuff's the new bit.
That was a good little session. We are fastest in the wet. Guessing the bike's okay then?
Could have been better, really, but
but you need a better team for that.
Just all the riding, really. It's all me.
Yeah.
Obviously, off riding the wet before, just build up, get as many laps in as I could. Had about 20 minutes, so I thought we'll get a good few in. Yeah, just kept going, really. Just got quicker and quicker. Surface definitely helped. Good surface. Bike was good. Yeah, just nice and easy. Too easy.
So it's been a really productive day, even though we only really did 2 sessions, but each session we got some really, really good laps in. We know the bike works really well in the wet, and he is happy with basically everything on it in the wet setting. In the dry, we've got a couple of little bits to test if we get some dry track tomorrow. But yeah, considering how little considering how bad the weather's been for the sessions, we've had really good quality track time. But we do need to clean the bike a bit now. So we've got the Moto wash, we'll get a bucket and sponge, we'll make it look ship shape. So last year we saw you running Triumphs. This year you've got some Suzukis. Talk us through it.
Well, like a challenge basically, and the Suzuki's been running in Moto America under the new generation Supersport rules last season, and it looked like quite a good competitive package. and we thought we'd run a good competitive package this year, so Suzuki's is where it's at. We've had a little bit of technical input from the American team, so obviously they've developed the ride-by-wire system on the throttle bodies, so we've got the same throttle body ride-by-wire system as them. It's the World Supersport new generation electronics package on the GSXR 750 with a completely standard motor. So these bikes aren't American bikes, they're bought out of the UK dealer network. And I think potentially it's the cheapest way to race British Supersport, hopefully, and hopefully be competitive as well.
So, standard engine.
Yes.
Modified throttle bodies with fly-by-wire.
Yes.
Control ECU.
Control ECU.
And then pretty much like a normal Supersport bike.
Ohlins, yeah, shock absorbers, different brake, master cylinder, the rear thumb brake with a feed-through rear brake on, so you can retain the foot brake with the Hell master cylinder. That's a feed-through, so your thumb brake comes into the master cylinder at the rear and then goes out and back to the caliper.
So, Yoshi system?
On this one at the moment, because it's like a pre-season test system, but unfortunately the Yoshi system won't fit with the big radiators we're having made, so we've got some different exhausts who are going to be UK-based MHP systems in the actual bike going forwards. But it's a case of sourcing parts at this time of year. It's just everything's mayhem. To be fair, the problem with the economies of Supersport isn't, say, building the bikes, because that's just a cost that it's pretty much a set cost. But when you've got something like an R6 that needs an engine refresh every 2 rounds that costs £5,000 an engine refresh, by the time you've done a 13-round season and 5 engine refreshes, that's quite a big budget. So hopefully we can do at least half a season before we're going to have a look at the motors in these, and really you haven't got to spend any money on tuning them. So it's reliability, keeps the cost down. It's a bike that should be competitive without going mad technically on it, and it should extend the life of the class.
So we're just getting ready for session 2 of the day, which is actually our first session, because the first session was that cold it was pointless. Matt is just topping fuel up. The bike has been thoroughly warmed up. We are still on wets, but the track is drying, but it's so cold that the wets are going to work better than any other tyre at the moment anyway. Basically, the only thing we actually need to test is the clutch mod, if that's any better. And even if you can't really feel it in this weather, we will be able to see it on the data, which is kind of handy. And if that's not fixed it, then we have got some engine brake map changes that Honda have suggested. So that's it. I'm looking forward to taking the tyre warmers off so that I can wrap them around me, because I am shivering. It is very cold. Alright, so he's done a 7-lap run on that wet, and even though he says the track's nearly dry, the wet's not too bad, because the track is 10 degrees in the ambient 7, so that's what sort of helped the tyre a little bit, and he did say he wasn't pushing particularly hard on it. So he's come in, we've put a inter-rear in the bike, because we've never run one of those yet, and he's just going to go out and basically ride a bit more and get used to the tyre. Franco's legging it down pit lane to see what Luke Hedger had in the back of his bike. Mid-session, we came in and swapped the rear tyre to an Inter, and we won the session by 1.1 seconds. Until Luke Hedger's last lap, we actually had 2.7 seconds over everybody. So I think Franco just wants to see what he's got in. But to be fair, when he pulled it in the wet, with the wets on, we were actually quite keen for him to stay in and not do anything daft. And he wanted to try an Inter. So we tried it, and it turns out it was worth doing. So we've learnt a bit more, because the rider made us. We'll let him have that one. Nothing says posh helmet reveal like the back of the truck, but this is Franco's new shark helmet design.
That Pete's just walked into one.
Look at that Bobby Dazzler.
Trees.
Palm trees, big name, glitter. Oh, that's posh, that is. We like that.
It smells. It's got that paint smell to it, hasn't it?
It does. Chrissy tribute in there.
Ah, lovely, yeah.
Nice.
And of course the orange on from Session Engineering. I like what you've done there.
That's the beach orange, actually. Nothing to do with Obsession, but
right. We're editing that bit out then. Bugger to you. Our main reason for actually coming back and sitting in the truck is to do a bit of a debrief from that session, and in effect the debrief's almost in 2 hours, because we're going to have his feedback from when he had the wets in, and then the feedback from whether the inter-rear in, because we know from lap times that the inter-rear was worth about 3 seconds a lap. So the notes are going to be different. So now we can sit down, do the track map, Franco can do that important stuff, and we can warm up for a little bit and eat ginger nuts. So, Inter's in it because it's too cold for wets. 5-lap run in just to get him a bit of a feel for the Inters.
Basically.
That'll do.
Anything else comes out of his pocket money.
Just done a 5-6 lap run on full Inters. What do you think to the Inters in the dry?
Yeah, I think they're quite similar to the wets, really squidgy, really quite a lot of movement in them. But I mean, for days like this when the temperature's really cold, really good to be fair. I definitely would want to run a slick. I cannot feel my hands, so definitely not going to keep the slick warm.
So that's it for Donington test. Considering the weather has been against us almost every session, we've actually had some really positive track time. We've been able to try quite a lot of stuff. We've got a dry setting that's pretty good around here. We've sorted out a bit of a clutch issue. We've got a really good wet setting. He's had some good time on the intermediates as well. So all in all, it's actually been really positive considering what it could have been. We've given the bike a quick turnaround, so that is ready to go. We're just packing up because it's a day off tomorrow, and then we're out at Silverstone. Welcome to Silverstone. It's cold and wet. Lovely. But Franco's still out there riding around because he's a bit weird like that. So 2 laps in, or 2 flying laps in, 3 now, he's in second place. In front of Dan Lindfoot, just behind Joe Talbot, and in front of, well, everybody else who's out there. It's a good job he likes the wet.
right, boss. Good, yeah, second fastest.
P2. We had a decent little debrief with Franco sat in the truck where it's a bit warmer, and the only real complaint is the bike doesn't turn very well and it runs a bit wide. Some of that is the fact that it's windy again today, but some of it is the fact that when we looked on the data, we had 40 mil of fork travel to spare, and the average was quite high in the stroke because this circuit doesn't have the loading that you get at Donington, because it doesn't have the same sort of speeds in the corners generally, apart from the first corner, which Franco said was okay. You're not getting the load into the fork, so therefore the bike doesn't want to turn. So it doesn't want to turn because you're not going fast, and you can't go fast because it doesn't want to turn. So we've gone down on the fork springs quite a lot. I went from a 10.5 to a 9.5 front spring, but the same preload, and that's the only change I'm making. So the wet session this morning was actually kind of useful to get that data, and even in the dry here we're not going to need to go as stiff as we went at Donington, because Donington's like that and here isn't. So it is still wet out there. It is not as wet, but it is still definitely wet, so hopefully we'll get some relevant data off the next session, which is in about 40 minutes time. You're used to doing your TV interviews now because you've just done some press stuff. So you say the girl who did the interview was attractive. Pit limiter's still on. Right, so we've had to call in a little bit early in our afternoon testing session because we've turned the back of the bike into a pogo stick, and this is not ideal for corner entry or exit grip. So he came in and said he didn't feel right. We tried a setting change, went back out, and it still wasn't right. So at the time he pulled in, he was 7th fastest out of about 35 bikes with a shock that's not playing. So there's no point trying to do anything else with that today. We're going to pull the shock out of it, get it over to Olin's, and they can double check everything for us. And then turns out it was actually a good idea to go testing today because we found a problem. Test day 2 at Silverstone, and from last night the rear shock is back in it, and apparently the rebound side non-return valve was sticking open, so basically the oil would just go straight past the rebound stack. We had no rebound damping, which is why it looked like a pogo stick on the data when he was riding it. So that's done. We've given a clean over, a check, the usual brake cleans, that sort of stuff. And this morning it is currently damp but not raining, so the circuit will dry quite fast because there's quite a lot of bikes on it, but the forecast is for it to tip down in a bit.
We have got a lot of wheels out. The downside is we've only got one set of decent discs, which is giving us a bit of a problem. So we all agreed on the Inter would be the best route to go. Into front, into rear, go out, see what it's like, probably put a slick in the rear. Plan was made, fantastic. Wheel out, ready to go, swap the discs over, and now it's rained.
So we've sent him out on full wet setup, and the important thing to test for the first few laps is the shock's working properly. And after that, if he's happy, because the shock was playing up, it was triggering the traction control because it was making the tyre not grip properly. So I've sent him out on a slightly different setup so we can adjust the traction on the buttons, because I did have that set for engine brake on the buttons, and there's more than one thing to change all the time, but we're trying to change as little as we can. So I can see him because he's got his bright pink and orange helmet on, which is great because he stands out. So that's it, he's pootling round. We'll have a look at the stopwatch and see what's going on. Here we come, lap 3, up to 2nd place. Yep, chipping away nicely. He's just getting the feel for it, enjoying riding around on his motorbike. It's a good job we went out for that session because it's damp and Franco was obviously running right at the top, and then a few laps later he's come in and the shock's done the same thing again. So we'll have that out and put the alternative in for the rest of the day and get a setting that works more to his liking on the Bitubo, and then we've got options next weekend because we're beginning to lose a little bit of faith in that one.
It's a bit annoying though really, because we have lost a full session because that one's gone again, but at least it's gone now and not in a race.
So the advantage of having 3 sessions a day and having long sessions is you can get quite a lot tested in a session. The disadvantage is it's a long time between sessions, but it does mean we've had plenty of time to put the Bitubo shock back in it. The Öhlins has gone back to Öhlins for them to actually test on the dyno. We're going to try the SCR2 harder compound rear tyre in it because it is now very, very wet outside, and that will give us a reading as to whether the tyre actually works in the really wet conditions, and because Silverstone's so abrasive, basically what our tyre wear rate is like. And it might be that the harder wet only works when it's beginning to dry and it's not quite inters yet, but we need to go and test it and see what it's like. Other than that, we've just got to put some petrol in it, usual warm-up cycles, we've had a bit of a check through it, then we'll be good to go again. Right, enjoy. No heroics, just get a feel for everything, yeah? Here comes our boy. Turns out the SCR2 rear wet does not work when it's this wet. Doesn't work, does it, Steve?
No, it's absolutely.
Yeah, and I was really useful, and of course I said, because we were going to test it, I said to Steve, have you tested the 2 rear wet? And so we now know that from both riders that this tyre is not the one to have when it's drowning wet out there. Franco, we were getting wheel spin down the straights up to about 40 to 50 kilometres an hour more rear wheel speed than the front down the straight. With spikes in it and stuff, and it didn't look very pleasant. So he did 2 laps pulled in, which is fair enough. Pete legged it down to Pirelli, and we've swapped the slick wheel to an SCR1 softer wet. So we're going to try that again, because we could do with getting some laps on the shock to see whether we can get a wet setting on the shock. And yes, it's not going entirely to plan, but it's better to be finding this stuff out on a test day than it is on race day, because if this was race day, we'd be having a very bad time. It definitely looks like it was a tyre issue, because where are we now, Pete? I think we were 23rd on the SCR2.
Yeah, no, we're 4th. We've gone to 4th now, so obviously it's working, which is good.
So it isn't wasted time, because we have now tested that in these conditions the 2 compound is no use at all.
Really surprising, isn't it? You look at a wet and you just think, yeah, that'll work. And this one, obviously, too hard, you know, it just didn't generate any heat. We maybe could look at it on a drier session, but certainly in a wet, which is strange for a wet, it didn't work. Yeah.
In effect, that's almost the intermediate from when you weren't allowed intermediates.
Yeah, I guess it was, but we've got intermediates, so God knows what we're going to do with that.
Avril, you look even more nervous than normal.
Very nervous. He's gone well though.
He is, he's flying again. Now we've got the right tyre in.
Absolutely. I'm very pleased.
Mega pole.
Fastest, yeah.
First. One dead.
Doesn't feel good.
McConnell tried to match you and he couldn't match you.
How far off is he?
Half a second.
Right.
Might be in my head now.
Yeah, it might not be too bad, boy. Might not be too bad.
Well, come on, jump off it. We're end of session anyway.
End of session, so. Here he is, look. Superstar coming. Franco, what were we doing last session?
Riding.
Anyway.
So Franco was going really, really well. He'd done 9 laps and done a 101.9 lap, and that put him 4th in the session, so it's going all right. Bearing in mind we're on a scrubbed set of wets, the front's actually done quite a lot of mileage, and a lot of people, being BSB even on a test, will put new tyres in. But then we came in, he liked the suspension change I made before the session. I've gone a little bit further the same way, and it must be going okay, because at the moment we're actually fastest in the session again. So, firstly, the boy can ride. Secondly, the boy could ride really, really well. And thirdly, I think we're getting a setup that works. Was that setting any better, do you reckon, or similar?
Similar, I've pushed a bit hard on that one.
Right, okay, so that's the range we want to be in though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, cool. That's all right. Right, the checkered flag is flying at the last of our testing before we go racing. I've seen him ride past the checkered flag, and the only thing he's got to do now is a practice start, because we haven't actually done any practice starts at all. Because it's wet, he's going to go manual and not use the launch control this time, because we're going to save that, hopefully for a dry session when we're racing. But it's been a pretty good test, especially as we finished the last session nearly 0.4 of a second in front of everybody. End of some very successful testing. Yes. Decent that, boy. We'll let you take your wet underpants off now. Yeah. So that's a wrap for our pre-season testing. In just over a week, we're back here at Silverstone for the first round of BSB. We are confident, but not cocky, that we stand a pretty good chance of having a really good result at the first round. Because Franco is on fire, the team's all working nicely, and he's loving riding his motorbike. So thank you for watching, and join us again next time for some more motorbike fun.